Hello and welcome to the Specialty Matcha podcast. My name is Ryan. This is my co-host Zongjun,
Hello.
and we're the co-founders of Sanko Matcha Products.
Yeah, so we launched this podcast to discuss our learning journey in Matcha, share startup stories, and interview experts. And today we're happy to have Ian from Yunomi.
Hello, Ryan from the future here. There was a slight internet lag when we did this recording, so we accidentally talked over each other a little bit. We tried to cut most of it in editing, but some of it was unavoidable. So apologies in advance for that. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We'd love if you could give a short introduction to Yunomi for our listeners, and the work that you're doing, working directly with Japanese tea farmers.
Okay, so my name is Ian. I'm the CEO of the company's name is actually called Matcha Latte Media, and there's a story behind this. But the service that forms the company is called Yunomi.life. Yunomi.life. It's the largest catalog of artisanal Japanese teas in the world. I started in the tea industry 14 years ago. I was free for various reasons at the time, and just happened to meet a tea farmer from Kyoto. I was introduced to a tea farmer from Kyoto. And they were trying to expand abroad, but really had no success beyond the trips that they would make every year to various places around the world and do like tea events. So I came in and I helped them launch their international tea business. And I helped through that company, through that farm, I met several other farmers. When I came back to Japan in 2012, I decided to aggregate those farmers into a single umbrella brand, and that became Yunomi.life. Our purpose was to help Japanese tea farmers rather than to sell tea. And so what we started to do was try to create a marketplace, first of all. And then we discovered that a marketplace for Japanese tea producers selling abroad was not going to work for many reasons that we could get into. And then so I pivoted after that to just a buy and sell model, even though our purpose is still to help as many Japanese tea farmers and tea factories as well as we can. So currently we have some 150 small scale tea farmers, and I define small scale by number of employees. So if you have 100 employees or fewer, and that actually consumes like most of the industry falls under 100 employees or fewer. But those companies are the ones that are allowed to sell on Yunomi. They don't sell on Yunomi, they sell to us and we sell it on their behalf. But as a result, we have, unlike most tea companies, we don't really think about our product lineup. We think of ourselves as a service that helps connect you to Japanese tea farmers and their products. And so we have something like 150 producers on board, a couple of tea merchants who provide added value in various different ways. And we have maybe close to 1,000 products, 1,000 Japanese teas, including something like 70 different matcha. So everything from the very, very lowest quality to the very, very highest quality. Although the very, very lowest quality, we try to discourage people from buying.
Oh, 1,000.
Yeah, so that's our business.
That's like a library.
I would not do this business if I were anybody else. I would not recommend that anybody try to do this business. It is the surefire way to lose money. And so, like the first couple of years, we lost several $100,000, I think, just trying to, just buying up all of the products from all of the different companies. And then when it started to get old, we just give them away for free. So that was the first couple of years. And so we lost a lot of money during that time.
Yeah, wow.
It's a lot of inventory, yeah. So if you want to take a look at the office, this is the office warehouse. And we've got tons and tons of inventory. I mean, it's still a small business, but this is how the scale that we're in. Well, what are you guys doing? I actually didn't really ask. Besides just selling matcha, like what's your take on matcha?
Yeah, actually, we're not selling matcha quite yet. but we're designing teaware to make matcha easier to prepare. So we have
Mm,
this chawan. So it's kind of elongated, so you don't have to do a zigzag. So this is our first product, but our main
mm,
product is we're working on designing a mill that's a countertop mill to mill matcha fresh. That's being designed in
mm.
the
So
Guangdong
you're
Shen.
trying to compete with Kuzen.
Definitely not a
Yeah.
direct competitor. Ours is going to be much more on the industrial side for like specialty coffee shops, um, and less so on the
Mm,
consumer side. So we think about it like a
Yeah.
really nice coffee grinder. So cheaper
Yeah.
than an Ishiyusu, but perhaps more performant than the existing countertop devices. Yeah,
okay. Um, so instead of like 30 kilograms, you're not gonna have a 30 kilogram Ishizu.
no, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay. Well,
we're
there is a company here in Japan that has, for example, a hydraulic press Ishizu. So you have two thin slabs of Ishizu, and you have a hydraulic
oh,
press that provides the weight um,
okay,
pressure. There is a company that does that. I know. I've seen them
interesting.
before. If more cafes carried matcha, I'm sorry, carried and had an ishiusu to for them to grind themselves, I would love to sell tencha rather than matcha. But
Yeah. Much
but
longer shelf life.
matcha itself, is a grinding, yeah, much longer shelf life, and actually the longer you age it, the if you age it properly, the longer you age it, the better it becomes. Kind of. If you ever had like matcha that was made from like 5-year-old tencha, it's still quite good.
Oh wow,
Mm.
okay.
You have to blend it. You do have to blend the matcha with some new matcha, like 10% 10% new tencha and like 90% old tencha or something like that. Like it has to be it creates a good blending base when you blend it. So I mean, there's a certain level there. It doesn't change that. After a certain level, it doesn't change that much. But aging it is quite nice, right?
Does the flavor profile change when you age tencha? What kind of like flavor profile
When you
differentiation?
age any tea, when you age, yeah, when you age any tea, what happens is that the antioxidants break down, and it breaks down by. I mean, you want to age the tea in a way that preserves the flavor as much as possible. So you don't want it to break down completely, but it breaks down a little bit by like a few percentage points, and then that allows the antioxidants break down faster than the glutamine components,
Oh,
glutamic acid components. That's the theanine, and that's the flavors that form the umami flavors, right? So
Mhm.
there are like 20 different types of glutamic acids or amino acids, and those don't break down as fast, especially if you keep it at like minus whatever minus 20 degrees. There's I don't know, like there's science behind it, and some people say that it should be at like minus 2 degrees or whatnot. But if you keep it cold, it preserves the flavor. If you keep it frozen, and therefore you can age it for a very, very long time. And as it ages, the antioxidants, the bitterness of components of the flavor break down, and so you're
Mm.
left with something that's has a higher concentration of umami. That's why you age things. You
okay,
want to take off that little slim of bitterness at the top.
interesting.
And it doesn't really matter all that much for lower quality matcha. So,
Yeah,
there's no need to age it for lower
for
quality
obvious
matcha.
reasons. Garbage in, garbage out.
So, well, I mean, garbage, like, it's relative, right?
That's true.
Like,
That's true.
everything that is being sold in the West, everything that is being sold in the West right now, even the highest quality matcha that you can possibly find in the West right now, none of that was considered matcha 10 years ago. None of it. Like the lowest, basically, like the lowest price per kilogram at wholesale, for anything that's considered matcha would have been like 40,000 yen per kilogram. That was 10, 15 years ago. That's what it was. Everything below that, it would be culinary usage,
Interesting.
and
Powder.
culinary usage was never considered matcha, never considered real matcha.
Mm.
Um, and so, I mean, all of this. So I'm sure your people know this, right, in the industry.
What changes have you seen over the past, let's say, like 10 years, especially at the small scale production? We've heard that like a lot of people are retiring. They don't necessarily have a succession plan. That there's a lot of consolidation, but like,
In
what's
general,
yeah,
there's a lot of, in general, in the agriculture industry, that's the case. For matcha specifically, everybody's getting into it. So
really?
all of the younger farmers are either getting into it because it's selling, or they're getting into it because they're being forced to transform their farms into tencha farms, at the lower grade particularly.
Okay.
Mm.
So the farmers who have their own factories are the ones that are visible to people like, industry players, like even like you and me. The ones who are visible to us are farmers who have their own factories or who have bothered to produce their own product so that they're selling their product on their own. Most farmers in the industry, however, they don't have their own factories, so they belong to a co-op, and so they sell their product to a co-op. And there's a co-op manager, and the co-op managers manage the factories, and or they might belong to a co-op where they utilize the co-op in turns. So like one day one farmer gets to use it, another day another farmer gets to use it. But
Okay.
most co-ops operate in the way that, okay, everybody, we are going to produce this tea all together. We're all going to harvest it at this time, and then we'll all everybody starts bringing their leaves to the factory at harvest season to get it processed, and it gets processed, and then it gets sold all together all at once. And that's how most of the industry works. So if the co-op that belong to everybody says, if they are, for example, contracted with a wholesale company like Aya Seicha, for example, if they're contracted with Aya, then that co-op will say, okay, well, Aya needs more tencha. They don't need any sencha. They need tencha. They don't need gyokuro. They don't need hojicha. They need tencha, and they need tencha at this quality at this price, right? So they'll force everybody in the co-op to say, well, if we're going to sell the tea leaves, you got to make this type of tea. So everybody has to make it. And so in some cases, you get people being forced to make tencha when they actually want to make something else. And in other cases, you also get, okay, everybody's got to, in order for us to keep this wholesale client, we've all got to go organic. So everybody has to go organic.
Oh.
And some people don't want to go organic because that actually lowers the quality of their product, of their leaf. But
Mhm.
that's what the market demands, so that's what they're going to do. And in the last 10 years, what I've seen is that as the industry has declined in Japan, and decline is kind of you need to qualify that. The industry has shifted towards mass production as well as ready to drink tea in plastic bottles. And since the industry in Japan has shifted there, and the industry abroad has grown, but grown in a way that most of the vast majority of tea that is being exported from large scale producers to large scale importers. Vast majority of that is are between large scale players, right? And so the large scale exporters or the large scale producers, they need to buy in large scale from various different primary producers, the farms and the factories, the primary farms and factories. And for non-tencha industry, it's pretty easy to buy, like, okay, everybody's making sencha, everybody's making normal ordinary leaf tea, and then they will you could buy like 1,000 kilograms from this co-op and 1,000 kilograms from that co-op, 500 kilograms from this co-op, and that's pretty easy. But for tencha, there was originally maybe 1,000 tons produced prior to this boom. Now there's more like 4,000 tons. So where that extra 3,000 tons of tencha is coming from is primarily larger scale co-ops, larger scale farms. And so the smaller scale farms are kind of there's not really much chance for them to take advantage of the global boom. There's not much chance for them to take advantage of the domestic boom in ready-to-drink teas. Though the two different markets shift towards that, the smaller scale farmers or the independent farmers who are trying to produce better tea end up with a smaller market to sell to, basically.
Interesting.
Would it be a fair summary to say that like there's a lot of development going on the commodity side, and that's where a lot of the money's being poured into, and then everyone who's on the specialty side is
Oh
struggling?
no, everybody on the specialty side is still on the commodity side, right?
Okay,
Like, what do you consider specialty is the question. That's what
like
I
the more
like.
like single
Anything,
origin, single cultivar. Like we've seen a pretty
yeah,
large
it's still all
explosion.
commodity though.
Okay,
It's still all commodity. It's primarily commodity coming from. I mean, the way that the agricultural production works is that people produce, even the largest scales companies, they'll produce it in batches, and those batches are single cultivars. And the reason why they do it like that, they sell it to the wholesalers. The wholesalers then have like batches of okumidori from a
yeah,
region. 600 kilograms from 600 kilograms of okumidori in times like 50 lots, and so they will have 3,000 kilograms of okumidori, or 30,000 kilograms of okumidori. You could call it single cultivar, of course. It might also come from the same region, so you could call it single origin also. But the ones who are producing it are large scale operations,
hmm.
right?
Okay.
So, and at that level, um, I mean, at that level, it's like commodity basically,
And that's
in my
mostly
opinion,
purchased at
anyway.
auctions, or is it more direct
It could be
relationship?
at auctions. It could be done direct relationships between suppliers and wholesale buyers. And the wholesalers are producers as well. The wholesalers will take different batches. They might take different batches of different cultivars as well. And they should have tea masters who are able to then take the leaf and then take leaves from several different batches and say, okay, well, if we blend these together, then we'll be able to make matcha, this quality matcha with these characteristics. And
Yeah,
those are the tea masters of the industry. They
yeah,
can be able to take, if they want to achieve this specific flavor profile with this color, this aroma, then you need to get these three batches of teas, and they tasted all the batches, and they're like, these three batches of teas will produce this matcha, and
okay,
that's the skill of the industry. And if they're not doing that, then just they're just like taking it and just making it, then there's no skill involved in that production,
sure,
and which is probably what happens quite frequently,
okay.
to be truthful.
To what degree? So, like,
Um,
as price increases and you're making quote unquote higher and higher quality product, right? Those products have certain attributes, like they're more umami heavy. Maybe there's more subtlety and nuance, less bitterness, and there's some characterization of what gets better, and you pay more. But to what degree do you think it's converging or diverging with Western preferences? Because I feel like the quality feedback loop in Japan is very much catered towards what Japanese people like and consider good. And to what degree are like Western palates or other palates being considered in this quality ladder?
well, first of all, the quality ladder is more of a ladder and less of a spectrum. So the more umami you have, there is also a level of like thickness or thinness, like light body or full bodiness, creaminess, I could say also creaminess slash fullness of the leaf of the matcha, and level of umami, and then level of bitterness, and then there's color characteristics that can go into quality. The aroma that it has is very like strength of aroma more than like type of aroma mainly, unless it's just really bad. And then of course the color of the matcha, but after a certain level, the color is pretty much just good. And then to get above a certain level of umami flavor as well as creaminess, you need to fertilize the soil pretty heavily.
Mm. Yeah.
And when you fertilize the soil heavily, and then there's other things like in certain regions, at the very, very highest level, in certain regions, the minerals of that region make for better soil development for the plants, for matcha or for tencha, and those regions produce better quality. But the main issue is that the more you fertilize, the more you attract insects and as well as weeds. And therefore, in order to deal with it, you need to use pesticides. And if you use pesticides, that immediately eliminates your product from being compliant in the rest of the world. So you can get up to maybe a level, like in my opinion, like a 6 out of 10, maybe a 7 out of 10 at the very, very best quality that can be organic, or exportable to the US and Europe. And then above that, it just can't. Like it wouldn't be compliant with pesticide residue regulation. So you could send it to individuals, but in order for a company to claim that they are compliant to their customers for insurance purposes, for example, to be able to provide documentation for it, they would not be able to. We, for example, would not sell those types of products to those types of companies because it's not compliant with those regulations in other countries. So as when you see what I've heard from customers is that for the most part, the quality level outside of Japan, if the quality level in Japan it ranges from 1 to 10, the quality level outside of Japan is generally 1 to 5. And 6 or 7 is quite rare and is generally the most premium stuff you can get on the market. And then most of it is like at a level 3 or 4. And then at the level 3 or 4, at that level, the color may be okay. It's going to be quite bitter. And so what people are drinking is just this really bitter matcha, right? But the way that they're drinking it is that they are, either diluting it quite a bit, or they are putting it into milk and making a latte or a smoothie. And at that point, the bitterness actually is a benefit because if there's not enough bitterness, it doesn't stand out against the milk, right? As you probably know. Like you need a certain level of bitterness for it to stand out against the milk.
You need the structure.
So that's the big difference in what I see in like what is considered good quality in Japan and the rest of the world. And in Japan itself too, like there's no real matcha consumer market, right? Matcha is something that is done primarily as a practice of the tea ceremony, which is not something, it's not a daily activity. It's something that you do like you would do ballet, for example. You don't go around dancing ballet down as you walk down the street, right?
Yeah.
And matcha is obviously served as matcha latte in cafes a lot. And so you do need that type of matcha for the matcha cafes. And it's very common in sweets and ice cream and chocolates and things like that. So that's where the industry is in Japan. There's no consumer market for matcha. So the quality level is thus then judged by the tea ceremony market, which is different, right? So it's not quite apples to apples.
Yeah, how heavy do you see the influence of the current Western market? The preference, the demands of the market has gone back to Japan and influencing purchasing or tea making decisions.
So wholesalers and refinement factories who are wholesalers were exporting quite a lot. They're going back to their farmers and asking them to produce more tencha at the lower quality level, at the lower price level. So that has really like shifted. And percentage wise, it goes from 1 to 5% of the industry. So it's a very small percentage of the industry still. But it has increased tremendously in terms of from where it was 10 years ago. So that's changed. So more companies, more farms are shading their fields, producing leaf for tencha. You also see the equipment manufacturers making a killing by exporting the matcha tencha equipment and the matcha equipment to China, to Vietnam. You also see inbound tourism is driving matcha as a drink at at restaurants and cafes, not domestic consumption, but domestic consumption by foreign tourists is driving demand for matcha, touristy areas, basically.
Mm.
So like in my daily life, I don't go around and I don't see matcha a whole lot. But if you go to Kyoto, if you go to Asakusa, where all the tourists are going, there's like matcha everywhere. Like every other restaurant has a matcha thing going on. And then so that has also started to affect prices now, particularly this year. Like prices have started to rise quite a bit, like double-digit percentage growth in terms of wholesale prices. So will that affect the prices outside of Japan? I don't know, because the Japanese to the yen rate has weakened so much that anybody selling not in Japanese yen is continually making more and more profit, right? Should I be talking about this? Maybe I shouldn't talk about this. We sell in yen, so we're not benefiting. Yeah, I mean, like prices rise 20%, but the yen has risen. The yen has fallen 20%. So it's the same price for importers, but they get to make more money.
Interesting dynamic.
So that's the dynamic that's going on right now. And is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It depends on who you are and where you are in the industry. The fact that there is a domestic market that's growing for it, even though it's not among Japanese people, is helpful for the industry, because so much of the matcha cannot be exported and the better matcha cannot be exported. So that's helpful. That's helpful. We do want to see more of that. Personally, though, I would like to see more of when I think about that, I don't think about, like, I'm very concerned. I'm interested and I'm in this business because it's part of Japanese culture. I came to Japan from Hawaii. I was studying astronomy at Brown University, and I switched and I decided to become an expert in Japan. And I came to Japan. I fell in love with the country. And then so I got into this industry that is like at the core of Japanese culture. And then all you see is like nobody actually drinks tea here. Nobody drinks matcha really. Some people do the tea ceremony, but some people do practice channel you, but not a lot of people. It's part of the culture, but it feels like almost like an artifact of the past that nobody's really participating in anymore these days. And that has increased from the time I've been here 25 years. And when I first came to Japan, you would go to offices and the secretaries would come out and bring tea for you, that's a gender problem, of course. So when I thought about it then, I was like, there's some heavy gender bias here in this office. On the other hand, now that is no longer the case, companies have discovered that in order to be more gender equal, it's better to put a vending machine in their office instead of having the women serve tea. And then there's more variety of beverages, and the employees pay for it themselves. So it's a win-win situation for all, except for the tea industry. The tea industry has lost, a huge portion of their market. It would have been better if men also learned to serve tea, but that was not the case. You see that shift I've seen this shift away from making tea to drinking out of it's very convenient to have a ready-made drink that you can go to anywhere. Like there's a vending machine on every corner. There's a convenience store everywhere. And it's so convenient to get the tea in a bottle, particularly in the summertime when you want something really cold. Really, you want it right now. You're living a busy, hectic life. It's nice to have it just ready for you, and it tastes decent enough, right? It's decent. People don't know how to make tea from a teapot these days. Like some people have never used a teapot. So that's a sad thing, I think.
Teapot sales rates are like very low. Like no one's buying like the whole teapot
sales rates.
Yeah, like Kyusu's and stuff.
Where did you hear that from?
It might have been from you, or maybe it was from the Tazumi people in one of their
maybe
YouTube.
It's definitely true. Specialists specialists, the ceramic artists who really specialize in making kyusu, they still make it, of course. But more general studios, more general ceramic manufacturers, they've shifted away from making kyusu to making like Western style teapots because it's more versatile. Because if you're going to drink tea, if you're going to drink something special, then it's probably going to be Western tea from India, Sri Lanka, or Britain, or French. French teas are a big thing. So if you're going to drink tea and it's going to be Western style, you will need a Western style pot. You could also use it for making Japanese tea if you need to, but Western style teas are, Western style teapots are more popular. And then, you could also make coffee drippers and coffee goods, and that's much bigger industry here in Japan. Like coffee is just a much bigger industry in Japan than tea is.
You see that happening everywhere in East Asia, like China, Korea. Like people drink coffee more than tea.
Coffee.
People drink coffee more than tea. I mean, so what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. In the West, it's the other way. Like people drinking more tea than coffee now.
I think that there needs to be more. Well, so tea was a big thing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Then bottled tea started to become better and better and started to take over. And so you'd see that there are a lot of people making tea, a lot of farmers making tea, and it peaked in the 80s when there were like 200,000 farms. Now there's in the last census at 2020, there's 12,000 farms. And the reason is because they've mostly consolidated and or just left and stopped farming tea. And the number of tea retailers, specialty tea stores have disappeared. Like 50% of the market share was taken up by specialty tea retailers. And now, that has been replaced by tea in supermarkets and drugstore chains. And so everybody has like the same mass-produced tea from the same small handful of larger scale manufacturers, and there's very little innovation as a result of that. There's very little experimentation as a result, and the small amount of experimentation that is done by independent brands are really done primarily by companies like producers or small scale companies, but you don't see it it's not very common. Like you don't see like small scale retailers all over the place the way they used to. And I think that there's a heavy weight in the industry that prevents people from coming in and starting new companies. There's the weight of history, and there are companies that have centuries of history behind them, and so people feel that tea is not an industry that you can break into here in Japan, which is not the case outside of Japan. Everybody is trying to start a tea company, and everybody's trying to start a matcha company now, but you don't see that happening very much in Japan. And I like to change that. I'd like to be able to see more and more companies start here in Japan. We could have more matcha brands here in Japan too. People doing more innovative things with the tea itself. And I would like to see more encouragement of people making tea at home, making tea in the restaurants, making tea as a dish rather than as a side drink that you don't really put much thought or time into. So I'd like to see that change as well.
The weight of history, and like how you have these colossal players that have been doing it for hundreds of years. I imagine that's quite intimidating if you're someone who wants to do something that's different and against the grain and innovative.
It is. I do not have any relationships with any of these like Ippodo or Marukyu Koyamaen or Fukujuen, Yamamotoyama. I don't know if they even know that I exist, for example. But, we would like to change that. We'd like to be able to. So I'm trying to start a platform. I'm trying to develop a software platform that would allow us as a small-scale manufacturer to manage a large number of small-scale tea brands. Let anybody who wants to put a matcha or tea product into a package and put their label on it, let them do it and make it very, very easy to do, and we don't have to deal with discussions and long, what do you have, and just come online and do it. So we're trying, kind of like a print-on-demand platform
That's good.
for tea and matcha. Then we could, if it's in Japan, we could drop ship also. We could do that type of drop shipping for service for companies in Japan or for customers in Japan. Outside of Japan, it gets very hard to do drop shipping.
Okay.
We get a lot of inquiries for drop shipping, but we can do it theoretically, but it doesn't really make sense to do it for individuals. It only makes sense if you're helping a company drop ship to one of their clients, and they don't care whether we appear as the exporter on the documentation. So that is
Very cool idea.
Yeah. So that's what I'd
Interesting.
like to see happen.
On a different interview, this is something that really piqued my curiosity.
Different interview.
Kenya was getting a tencha processing facility. I was wondering if you could.
I think that might have been Sencha.
Oh, sencha. Okay.
There we go. So KTDA, Kenya Tea Development Agency, is in the final stages of setting up Africa's first Japanese specialty green tea production factory as part of its long-term product diversification strategy. And they were helped out by JICA, which is the Japan International, what is it called? There's a non-governmental agency in Japan that helped them to help fund set up this tea processing factory in Kenya. Yes. So what type of tea is it? I think at that time it was sencha. But I do know that the tencha equipment manufacturers are exporting to India, China, Kenya, Rwanda, Sri Lanka. Like tencha factories, equipment for tencha is being exported all over the world.
And are they using
would not be surprised.
Are they using Japanese cultivar in all those places too?
I doubt it.
Okay. In
I doubt
China,
they are.
it's a hybrid. Sometimes they use Chinese green tea cultivar. Sometimes they even import Japanese cultivar. But for other places,
the Chinese government was very like the Japanese government kind of like ignored it, and the Chinese government was, I don't know whether that was a strategic decision on their part or not, but after 2011 they banned Japanese tea from coming in. First due to radiation contamination, but then afterwards it was like, oh, this is great that we have it banned and no Japanese company can export tea to Japan. So they all, like, in order to break into the Chinese market, they all set up their own joint ventures and taught the farmers in China how to grow tea in a certain way, and like exported the manufacturing equipment and set up their own competitors.
Interesting.
Which, for better or for worse, for better or for worse. Well, I mean, like the matcha industry, if it continues to grow, will grow way beyond the capacity of Japan to supply it globally. So, it's fine. The better as matcha production and quality gets better in places like China and Vietnam, you'll see those places take over the market for it. Even though people want Japanese matcha at the quality level that makes up most of the market, it probably would not matter whether it's Japanese or Chinese matcha. Like, they won't mention it anywhere. They'll just say it's matcha. And then specialty brands will be focused on Japanese specific matcha. And for the most part, like, the industry will be dominated by, sub $50 kilogram matcha, which is, can be produced in China, I think, from what I remember. And so, like, how does that change the industry? I don't know. I think that the industry will be much bigger, and there will still be enough demand for Japanese matcha, especially at the higher end. And that should be a good thing for the industry if it becomes more of a mainstream flavor throughout the world, and I think it will be. So then the question is, for me at least, the question is how does that benefit small scale manufacturers on one hand? How does that benefit the culture, the evolution of the culture surrounding tea? If it's non-Japanese culture, it'll evolve in different ways. In Japan, in Japanese culture, how does culture evolve with that. If tea became a product that you drank from a bottle and only a bottle, and you didn't actually ever see the tea leaf, to me that's a little bit sad. Like I would say that part of the culture of tea is not simply just drinking the tea, but it's also making it. And making it is part of the culture, and it's the part of the culture that is being lost. I'd like to hear more about your matcha mill. Like, what are your targets?
Yeah. So our goal is
What are they?
basically to change the model from a centralized milling model, and then it's distributed all over the world, to where we're pushing the milling or the last manufacturing step as close as we can to the edges to make fresh ground matcha as ubiquitous as fresh ground coffee. So to do that, we're designing this countertop mill, and we've studied to the extent to which we can sort of the performance metrics for Ishiusus around particle shapes, particle size, low temperature milling, and are putting technologies together drastically reduce the weight and size. So we're using ceramic millstones. We're very carefully doing the millstone design, and it will have an active cooling system. So we can remove heat from the system, and you can actually control exactly
You
how hot
know,
you let.
you don't want it too cold, right? You want some heat.
Yeah,
You don't
some
want
heat.
it
Well,
to
we
be
want
too
to put that
cold
into
on
control because
condensation.
depending on the base tensha, you could get very different outcomes.
To be able to control the heat level of the mill. You know,
To
like
a degree.
I know this like this the Tensha artisanal, really experienced millers, for example, know which mill produces the best matcha, and they'll, depending on temperature, the ambient temperature of the day, they will spin the mill for, without any leaf, they'll spin it for 5 to 10 minutes to warm it up so that you generate heat.
Oh,
um, because you don't want to spin it cold. You don't want cold stone. As you spin it, the warmth of the stone generates heat, and heat, everyone says that heat degrades the matcha. It does, but it's also roasting it a
Stimulate.
little bit. And if you get just that slight roastiness of the matcha, that forms part of the flavor. So that's really, at the artisanal level, that's a feature that could be a feature of the mill, to be able
oh.
to toast the matcha as you're grinding it.
We the
I mean,
first version, the cooling system was not the greatest, and it definitely needs a cooling system. It got very hot, but it'll be an interesting variable to put in people's hands where it's quantified. Like there's the direct sensor, and you can say, what does this look like at 40 degrees Celsius versus 70 degrees Celsius?
So that we don't know, for example, like why do some stones produce better tasting matcha than other stones, even though they're supposedly the same stone. There must be something, right? And then, like, how fine of a grain can you get?
Yeah, so we're shooting for around 5 to 10.
Really, that's impressive.
We're still in prototyping stages, so still it's the jury's still
But
out on
so
that.
let me think about this. Like, if you're trying to make it like that, then the time that it takes to mill, wouldn't that make it prohibitive or impractical for most purposes?
So one of the benefits of the cooling system is we can really ramp up the RPM, so it can go
we can
much
make it way
faster.
faster.
So it'll grind faster.
Yeah,
And there's a way to return the powder to the grinder so that it grinds multiple times so that you can get it to be finer.
Not on this version yet.
Okay.
Although I see no reason why it couldn't be done.
That would be nice because you could get it finer, I suppose. Interesting. Well, I would love to, like I said, I would love to be able to handle tencha rather than matcha. So if this became the new standard, then I would welcome it personally.
Awesome.
We would love various different qualities from everybody, and then be able to provide that to people. But Kuza and Matcha, for example, they say their leaf is proprietary leaf. It's not normal tencha. I've never actually seen it, so I don't know whether it is normal or not normal tencha. But that doesn't allow that doesn't allow everybody else into the industry to get involved, which I think is a mistake. Like you,
Oh,
if
definitely.
all of the tencha farmers or producers were to come in and say, everybody get a kuzen matcha thing so that we can sell you tencha instead of selling you matcha, that doesn't help grinders. Grinders don't want that, of course. And if you've invested a lot of money in grinding machines, you don't want that. You want to use their grinding machines. But for everybody else who doesn't have a grinding machine, then they can get involved and capture a greater value of the matcha product if they don't have to sell to a wholesaler who's grinding the matcha for them. So I think that would be better for the industry. I'd also like to be able to see, like, if you could take, for example, like, what if you could take some dried mint leaves and put it into the tencha, blend it into the
Oh,
tencha, and then grind it. So I would love for you to think about that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
different
obviously, you can't do that
material.
with everything because a tencha leaf and a freeze dried bit of mango would not grind together very well. But certain things could grind together, possibly. I mean,
Mhm.
the thickness of the leaves are different. Yeah, maybe it's not possible.
But like in the future,
Yeah,
we probably
maybe it's
be
not possible.
developing different grindstone patterns. We can set different customized pressure, and of course, the RPM can be set differently, so for different kind of tea. So it will be much more versatile.
You'd have to grind things separately, though. No, it's okay, I guess.
Yeah.
More production by individuals in their own homes I think, is very interesting. I'd like to see more of that happen, and I'd like to see that more of that happen both around the world as well as in Japan. Like to return the idea of making and crafting your own tea by yourself, making that crafting part of your life, the way that you might, get into cooking food. Especially here in Tokyo, you could literally spend like every single meal buying meals from the convenience store. And it could be healthy too because they sell salads, multiple different types of salads, at convenience stores. But you don't because you want to cook yourself. You want to be able to have that product, your food freshly cooked. You want to be able to make it for yourself, make it for your family. You want to make a much wider variety of things for yourself. And if we could explore that I don't want to say tea drinking. The reason why the company is named Yunomi.life and not Yunomi Tea is that we want to encourage this lifestyle of Yunomi is a pun meaning you know me in English, but in Japanese, it's a word that's literally drinking warm water, but that is meant to mean drinking tea. But if we
Mhm.
think about it as, drinking infusions basically and expand the idea from drinking tea to drinking infusing many different types of things, including tea,
Mm.
and requiring you to have like good tea in order to create a good quality infusion of tea and other things. And then we can recreate a new tea culture that is more vibrant here in Japan and around the world even.
yeah.
That's my dream.
We started our journey at the Tea Institute at Penn State, and it's basically a small student community where
Tea
everyone was
Institute.
brewing tea all the time. And you would taste, you would critique, we would learn. It was really interesting community to have. So it's where our passion for tea got cultivated. So we
Interesting.
deeply resonate with that mission.
Yeah, we don't focus too much on like matcha producers because truthfully there are not very many independent matcha producers.
Mm.
And the ones who are like the farms who are matcha producers, the farms who sell their own matcha, very few of them are. So you have the multiple steps of production from farm to cup, or the farming of it, the processing of it, the refinement of it, which includes blending and toasting or green roasting, as I would say, sorting out different parts. You have the grinding of it, you have the storage of it, and there are specialists at each stage, right?
Mm.
Particularly at the refinement and the grinding stage. So a farmer comes in and they might, for example, have farming tencha. They might have their own sencha factory, or they might have their own refinement equipment. They probably don't have a tencha factory and refinement equipment and grinding equipment. Very few companies do have that, like completely vertically integrated. So at some point, they're outsourcing their product to other people to do. And as soon as they outsource it, they lose control and they lose the ability to really like produce it as a craft rather than produce it as an OEM manufacturing. And because of that, you can have the same leaf from the same farm and get two different types qualities of final product from a farm, direct farmers themselves, as well as from versus a wholesaler who has more experience in refining something. Or you might have a farm that saves their best quality for themselves too. So it's really hard to tell like what you're getting from which part of the industry, unless you just like you have to like really examine and compare and contrast these things. So I wanted to have more, independent farmers. Like everybody wants an independently farmed matcha, but matcha is not farmed. Matcha is produced after several steps after the farm, and the better matcha is produced really by the ones who can or have the ability to blend it. Yeah, like we have 1,000 teas, but only like a couple dozen. We should go after more. I guess we should go after more independent, small scale grinding companies. That's possible to be able to provide more options for matcha. I look forward to seeing what your mill looks like.
We'll be in Japan in late August, early September, and we'll definitely route through Tokyo. Hopefully, with the machine in hand.
You should come in September rather than August. Like as far away from August as you can get, because it's very hot.
Okay.
Hot and humid. Yeah. If you could come in late September, that actually is better.
Okay.
Late September is much more comfortable.
Okay.
October is very nice because you also get the changing of the leaves in late October too. So it's very nice to
or like around
visit.
Kyoto.
You could visit Kyoto in the changing of the leaves. That is very nice. It's a very nice time to visit Kyoto. Hard to judge. It's either late October, early November, but if you could time it just right, but it's very beautiful. So I recommend that.
Okay.
I don't recommend August. We will probably have a very nice facility for you to visit when you come.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
I'm signing the contract soon, hopefully, the lease contract soon. It's not going to be a cafe, but it'll be kind of like an imitation cafe. Like I don't particularly want to run a cafe, but we want to have a space that we can greet people in, that do experimentations in, have a photo studio. And cool. So I'm renting a place that's very nice. Hopefully we can get all of the paperwork done. So by the time you come, hopefully it'll be available.
That's good.
Okay.
Looking forward to it.
And thank you for being so generous with your time. All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider rating this podcast or sharing it with a friend. Thank you, Ian from Yunomi, for joining, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.
See you in the future.
See you.